Drummerly.com Unlimited Drama Series.
The day after we moved in, I got a call from the previous owner. I saw what your son did while you were at work, on camera. Come over, alone. What could my son have done in a single afternoon that made a stranger so afraid? What I discovered next would shatter everything I thought I knew about my own family. My name is Ethan Hale, and at 58, I thought I had life figured out. As a payroll supervisor, I've always been methodical, careful with details, and perhaps too trusting for my own good. When my son Calder suggested we move into a new apartment together to save money, I saw it as a chance to reconnect with my 27-year-old boy, who seemed to be struggling to find his footing. The apartment was perfect, a spacious two-bedroom in a well-maintained building. The previous owner, Gordon Shevlin, a retired engineer in his early 60s, had taken excellent care of the place. During our brief meeting at the handover, he seemed nervous, almost distracted, but I attributed it to the stress of moving. Calder arrived with his girlfriend Mireya Rosales, a social media-savvy 26-year-old who immediately started taking photos of every room. "This place is going to look amazing on Instagram," she gushed, already rearranging furniture before we'd even finished unpacking. Her enthusiasm felt infectious, though something about her calculating gaze as she surveyed our new home made me slightly uncomfortable. The first day passed in a blur of boxes and logistics. I left for work the next morning, leaving Calder and Mireya to continue settling in. When I returned that evening, the apartment felt different. The furniture had been completely rearranged. There was an odd chemical smell in the kitchen that reminded me of industrial cleaning products, and Mireya was conspicuously absent. "Where's Mireya?" I asked Calder as I hung up my coat. "Oh, she had some errands to run," he replied without looking up from his phone. "You don't mind that we moved some stuff around, do you? The feng shui was all wrong." That evening, as I was preparing for bed, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was unmistakably Gordon's, the previous owner. "Mr. Hale, this is Gordon Shevlin. I need to speak with you urgently. I forgot to remove a security camera from the apartment, and I saw something disturbing on the footage. Something involving your son. Please call me back as soon as you get this. And when you come over, and you need to come over, come alone." My blood ran cold. What could Calder have possibly done? As I replayed the message, I noticed something I'd missed before. A tiny red light blinking in what I'd assumed was just a smoke detector above the living room. The light pulsed once, twice, then went dark. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every sound from Calder's room made me wonder what Gordon had seen. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was probably nothing serious. Maybe Calder had accidentally broken something and was too embarrassed to tell me. I called Gordon first thing in the morning and arranged to meet him at his new apartment, just 2 floors down in the same building. When he answered the door, his face was grave, and his hand shook slightly as he gestured for me to come inside. "I'm sorry about this, Ethan," he said, leading me to a small desk where a laptop sat open. "I should have removed all the equipment before I handed over the keys. I only realized yesterday when I was reviewing the files to delete them." Gordon's fingers trembled as he clicked through folders on his computer. "I installed that camera system after a break-in attempt last year. It's motion-activated and records everything. I meant to take it down, but with the move..." He trailed off, then turned the screen toward me. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. I watched my son Calder systematically going through my personal belongings, my desk drawers, my briefcase, even my wallet. The timestamp showed this had happened just hours after I'd left for work the day before. "That's not the worst of it," Gordon said quietly, pausing the video. "But you need to be careful how you handle this. There's more footage, but I think you should see what you're dealing with first." My stomach churned as I watched my own son violating my privacy and trust. But Gordon was right. I needed to be smart about this. Confronting Calder directly might only make him more careful about covering his tracks. "Can you keep recording for a few more days?" I asked Gordon. "I need to understand the full scope of what's happening." Gordon nodded grimly. "The camera's still active. I'll keep the footage safe." As I walked back to my apartment, my mind raced. I quietly checked my belongings and discovered that a folder containing important financial documents was missing from my desk drawer. But more disturbing was the calendar on my kitchen counter. A date 2 weeks from now was circled in red ink with the word inspection written beside it. I hadn't written that. When Calder emerged from his room that morning, he was unusually cheerful, almost giddy. "Good morning, Dad. Beautiful day, isn't it?" I was thinking maybe we should plan a little trip soon. Celebrate the new place. His enthusiasm felt forced, performative. As I watched him pour coffee with exaggerated casualness, I realized I was looking at my son through completely different eyes. The question wasn't what he had done, it was what he was planning to do. The next few days revealed a pattern that chilled me to the bone. My direct deposit hit my account every 2 weeks like clockwork, but when I went to buy groceries that Friday, my card was declined. Confused and embarrassed, I checked my banking app right there in the checkout line. The money was there, but there was also a new external transfer setup that I definitely hadn't authorized. At work, my colleague Tessa Klein from HR pulled me aside during my lunch break. "Ethan, we had a strange incident with your payroll account yesterday. Someone tried to access your profile and change your direct deposit information. We flagged it as suspicious and denied the request, but I thought you should know." My blood pressure spiked. Did the attempt come from my login credentials? "That's what made it so concerning," Tessa replied, lowering her voice. "The login was successful, which means someone had your username and password. You might want to change all your credentials immediately." When I returned to my desk, I found a sticky note on my monitor with a new password written in handwriting I didn't recognize. I definitely hadn't written it, and the only people with access to my workspace were security and anyone who might have photographed my desk setup for my personal belongings at home. That afternoon, my neighbor, Nina Patterson, a school secretary who lived across the hall, knocked on my door. Nina was observant by nature, a quality that served her well in her job, and she looked troubled. "Ethan, I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you running some kind of business from your apartment? I've noticed a lot of strangers coming and going during the day when you're at work. Different people almost every day, and they always seem to have keys." My mouth went dry. "What kind of strangers?" "Well, yesterday there was a young couple with suitcases who stayed for about 3 hours. The day before, it was a businessman who kept taking phone calls in the hallway. And this morning, I saw a cleaning crew leave around noon." Nina paused, looking uncomfortable. I wouldn't normally say anything, but building policy is pretty strict about subletting. After Nina left, I searched my apartment more carefully. In the kitchen trash, buried under coffee grounds and takeout containers, I found a crumpled checklist titled Airbnb Cleaning Protocol, with items like replace towels, sanitize surfaces, and check for guest belongings. My hands shook as I photographed the checklist. I was beginning to understand what was happening, but the scope of it was staggering. I opened Instagram and searched for Maria's profile. Her most recent story, posted just 4 hours earlier, showed her lounging in what was unmistakably my living room. The photo was captioned, "Another successful hosting day. Hashtag Airbnb life. Hashtag side hustle." And if you looked carefully, you could see our apartment number reflected in the window behind her. The water bill that arrived that week confirmed my worst fears. Usage had spiked dramatically, consistent with multiple people showering and using facilities throughout the day. When I confronted Calder about it, he barely looked up from his phone. "Dad, you're being paranoid. So what if we have friends over? You're at work anyway. It's not like we're bothering you." But Maria was less diplomatic. When she emerged from Calder's room and saw me holding the water bill, she smirked. "What's wrong, Ethan? Worried about a few extra dollars? Maybe if you weren't so uptight about everything, you'd realize we're actually contributing to this household. Contributing how exactly? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. We're making this place actually livable, she replied, her voice dripping with condescension. Before we got here, this was just a sad old man's apartment. Now it's actually worth something. That evening, as I sat in my bedroom reviewing bank statements on my laptop, a notification popped up on my phone. Guest arriving 3 p.m. tomorrow. Please have key under mat. The message was from some kind of booking platform, but it was addressed to my apartment. I screenshot the message and added it to a growing folder of evidence I was quietly compiling. Gordon had been right. I needed to be careful and methodical. But I was also beginning to realize that what I'd initially thought was opportunistic theft was actually something much more sophisticated and calculated. By the weekend, I knew I needed help. I called my older brother Ronan, a no-nonsense construction foreman who had always been my voice of reason during family crises. We met at his house, where I laid out everything I'd discovered so far. Ronan listened without interruption, his face growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he leaned back in his kitchen chair and shook his head. Ethan, they're not just stealing from you, they're using you. Your home, your credit, your reputation, everything. And that girl, she's the brains behind this operation. Calder's just dumb enough to go along with it. But he's my son, Ronan. How do I... He's a 27-year-old man who's committing fraud, Ronan interrupted. Being your son doesn't give him a license to destroy your life. You need to document everything and get legal help. Now. The next morning, I visited my bank and requested a meeting with Marcel Dupont, a fraud specialist I'd worked with years earlier on a payroll security issue. Marcel was thorough and precise, qualities I desperately needed right now. The good news is that most of these transactions can be reversed if we can prove fraud, Marcel explained as he reviewed my account history. The bad news is that someone with access to your personal information has been very busy. Marcel pulled up security footage from the bank's ATM. There, clear as day, was Calder using my debit card at 11:47 p.m. the previous Tuesday. The timestamp was crucial. I'd been asleep, and Calder had obviously taken my card from my wallet while I was unconscious. We'll need to file a formal complaint and freeze the compromised accounts, Marcel continued. I'm also going to recommend that you change all your passwords and PINs immediately. As I left the bank, my phone buzzed with a text from Nina. Saw them loading suitcases into a car this morning at 5:45 a.m. Took photos with timestamps if you need them. Nina's vigilance was becoming invaluable. When I met her that evening, she showed me the photos on her phone. Calder and Mireya were clearly visible loading multiple suitcases and cleaning supplies into a car parked outside our building. The metadata showed the exact time and date. I've been keeping a log, Nina admitted. I know it might seem nosy, but something about this whole situation felt wrong. Different people every day, always during business hours, always with keys. That's not how normal guests behave. Meanwhile, Tessa from HR called with an update. Ethan, we completed the audit on your payroll account. Someone definitely tried to change your direct deposit to an account registered under the name C. Hale. The attempt was made using your login credentials, but from an IP address that doesn't match your usual work location. The pieces were falling into place, but I needed more evidence before I could take action. That evening, I mailed a certified letter to myself, creating a paper trail of the date and time. I photographed every room in the apartment, documenting the current state of my belongings. Gordon called that night with an update. I've been reviewing more of the footage. There are conversations between your son and his girlfriend. You need to hear what they're saying about you. Can you make copies of everything? I asked. Already done. I'm keeping the originals on a backup drive hidden in my apartment. If anything happens to the main files, we'll still have evidence. Mireya's social media was becoming a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. Her Instagram story from that afternoon showed the interior of my apartment again, this time with a caption that read, "Booked solid this week, hashtag blessed hashtag entrepreneur." The timestamp proved she was actively advertising my home while I was at work. But it was Calder's behavior that hurt the most. When I gently asked him about his plans for the week, he became defensive and aggressive. Why are you suddenly so interested in my schedule, Dad? You never cared before. Are you trying to control me now? The gaslighting was textbook manipulation, but knowing that didn't make it sting less. This was my son, the boy I'd raised, taught to ride a bike, helped with homework. Now he was looking me in the eye and lying with practiced ease. That night, Gordon left another cryptic voicemail. You need to see all of it, Ethan. What I showed you before was just the beginning. I knew I needed legal advice, so I contacted Grant Osei, a legal aid attorney who specialized in tenant rights and fraud cases. Grant was patient and precise, exactly what I needed as my world crumbled around me. The first thing we need to establish is that Calder is legally a guest in your apartment, not a tenant, Grant explained during our consultation. Since he's not on the lease and hasn't established residency through official channels, you have more options than you might think. Grant reviewed the documents.
She left this in your apron. You didn't even throw it away.
I forgot.
You forgot a woman's lipstick in your—
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
I'd brought bank statements, the Airbnb cleaning checklist, Nina's witness statement, and photos from the hidden camera footage Gordon had shared. There's something else, Grant said, examining a building management form I'd found in my apartment. This signature doesn't match your other documents. It looks like someone forged your name to authorize guest privileges in the building. The forgery was subtle but clear when compared to my actual signature. Someone had practiced copying my handwriting, but the pressure and angle were slightly off. It was sophisticated enough to fool a casual observer, but wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. I spent the weekend methodically gathering all of Calder's belongings and boxing them up. Each box was labeled, photographed, and cataloged. If this went to court, I wanted a clear record of what belonged to whom. Building management called Monday morning with a complaint. Mr. Hale, we've received multiple noise complaints about your unit. Parties, loud music, people coming and going at all hours. This is a quiet building, and we need to address this immediately. I explained the situation to the building manager, showing them the evidence I'd compiled. They were shocked, but not entirely surprised. We've had similar issues with unauthorized subletting in other units, the manager explained. The problem is proving it. But with your documentation, we can definitely take action. The scratched keycard I found under my doormat that week was the final piece of the puzzle. The magnetic strip was worn from repeated use, and the building's security system showed it had been used to access the building over 40 times in the past 2 weeks, always during business hours when I was at work. Grant helped me file a formal eviction notice, even though Calder wasn't technically a tenant. We're treating this as a guest who has overstayed their welcome and violated the terms of their stay, Grant explained. The certified mail creates a legal timeline. Meanwhile, Marcel at the bank discovered that Mireya had made several large cash withdrawals from her own account, amounts that roughly corresponded to the money missing from mine. It looks like she was laundering the stolen funds through her personal account, Marcel explained. That's a federal crime. Nina provided a detailed written statement about the guest traffic she'd observed, including dates, times, and descriptions of the people she'd seen. Her meticulous record-keeping was building an ironclad case, but it was Gordon's call that week that changed everything. Ethan, I've been going through all the footage. There are hours of conversations between Calder and Mireya. They're not just stealing from you. They're planning something bigger. They mentioned Dad never checks the files, and something about the next listing. You need to see this before they realize you know. I spent the week finalizing my evidence collection. Every document was organized, every timeline verified, every witness statement notarized. I met Nina at a local cafe to get her signature on a formal statement about the guest traffic she'd observed. I've been thinking about this situation, Nina said as she signed the document. What bothers me most is how calculated it all seems. This isn't just kids making bad decisions. This is a planned operation. Marcel called with an update from the bank. We've completed our investigation. The fraudulent transfers can be partially reversed, but we'll need to file a formal complaint with law enforcement to recover the full amount. The good news is that we have enough evidence to freeze the accounts where the money was transferred. Tessa from HR provided the final piece of the employment puzzle. The payroll audit is complete, and we've flagged Calder's attempt to change your direct deposit as attempted fraud. We're required to report this to our security department, which means there's now an official record of the crime. But it was Mireya's overconfidence that provided the most damning evidence. Her latest social media post showed a video tour of my apartment, complete with commentary about the luxury amenities and prime location. She'd tagged it with multiple hashtags, including hashtag Airbnb host and hashtag rental property. And if you paused the video at the right moment, you could see my personal mail on the kitchen counter. The arrogance was breathtaking. She wasn't just committing fraud, she was advertising it. That afternoon, I noticed the red light on the smoke detector camera blink off for the last time. Gordon had finally deactivated it, but not before capturing everything we needed. Mireya's final text message to me was the last straw. "You can't stop us, Ethan. You're old and weak, and Calder deserves better than a father who can't even see what's happening in his own home. We're going to take everything, and there's nothing you can do about it." Grant delivered the formal eviction timeline that evening. "Everything is in place," he said. "The legal notice has been served. The evidence is documented, and the authorities are aware of the situation. Now we just need to execute the plan." I changed all the door codes and locks that night. Whatever was going to happen, it would happen on my terms. The utility bill that arrived the next morning showed the full scope of their operation: water usage consistent with a small hotel, electricity bills that had tripled, and wear and tear that would normally take months to accumulate. Gordon's final call came that evening. "Management wants an emergency meeting tomorrow. They've received complaints from other tenants, and there are legal issues that need to be addressed immediately. Bring everything, all your evidence, all your documentation. It's time." I looked at the calendar on my kitchen counter. Tomorrow's date was circled in red, the inspection date I'd found weeks ago. Whatever Calder and Mireya had planned, they'd chosen the same day I'd chosen to end this. The emergency meeting was held in Gordon's old apartment, which building management had converted into a conference room for the occasion. When I arrived with my evidence folder and backup drive, I was surprised to see how many people were there. Building management, a police officer, Nina, and several other neighbors who'd witnessed the suspicious activity, and even Marcel from the bank, who'd agreed to participate via phone. Calder and Mireya arrived 20 minutes late, clearly confident and dismissive. Mireya had brought someone she introduced as their lawyer, though he looked more like a college friend than legal representation. "I don't understand why we're all here," Calder said, settling into a chair with exaggerated casualness. "If Dad has a problem with us, he should talk to us directly instead of involving strangers." The building manager, a stern woman named Mrs. Chen, opened the meeting by explaining the complaints they'd received about unauthorized subletting, noise, and guest violations. "We have serious concerns about activities in Unit 4B, and we need to address them immediately." That's when Gordon stepped forward with his laptop. "I think everyone needs to see this," he said quietly, connecting his computer to the room's display screen. The footage was devastating. Hours of clear video showing Calder and Mireya systematically going through my belongings, discussing their business plan, and openly mocking my stupidity for not realizing what they were doing. In one particularly damning clip, Mireya could be heard saying, "He's so pathetic. He actually thinks we're here to help him. By the time he figures out what we're doing, we'll have enough money to disappear." Calder's response was even worse. "Dad's always been a pushover. He'll never have the guts to stop us. We could rob him blind and he'd still make excuses for us." The room was silent as the footage played. I watched my son and his girlfriend systematically planning to destroy my life, and I felt something inside me finally break. Not with sadness, but with clarity. When the video ended, I stood up and presented my evidence folder to Mrs. Chen and the police officer. Bank audit logs showing unauthorized transfers, payroll records documenting attempted fraud, Nina's detailed witness statement about guest traffic, photographs of the Airbnb cleaning supplies, and forged building management forms. Grant, who had arrived during the video presentation, explained the legal situation. Calder Hale and Mireya Rosales have been operating an illegal subletting business, committing bank fraud, attempting payroll fraud, and forging official documents. Mr. Hale has followed all proper procedures for eviction and has documented evidence of multiple crimes. Marcel's voice came through the conference phone with clinical precision. The bank has frozen all accounts associated with this fraud case. We've traced approximately $8,000 in unauthorized transfers, most of which were laundered through Ms. Rosales' personal account. This is sufficient evidence for federal fraud charges. Tessa from HR had also joined by phone. The payroll system shows clear evidence of attempted identity theft and fraud. We're required to report this to law enforcement and our security department. The police officer took notes throughout the presentation, then turned to Calder and Mireya. You have the right to remain silent, but I need to inform you that you're both facing multiple felony charges, including fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. Mireya's confidence finally cracked. She tried to blame me, claiming I had given them permission to use the apartment and access my accounts. But Mrs. Chen pointed out that her name was on the Airbnb hosting account, and the bank records showed large deposits that corresponded exactly to the money stolen from my accounts. The evidence is overwhelming, the police officer continued. We'll need you both to come to the station for formal questioning. Calder finally spoke, his voice small and desperate. Dad, please, I'm sorry. We made mistakes, but we're family. You can't let them arrest me. I looked at my son, really looked at him, for the first time in weeks. The charming facade was gone, replaced by the calculating manipulator I'd seen in Gordon's footage. You're right, Calder. We are family. And that's exactly why this hurts so much. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But being family doesn't mean I have to let you destroy my life. It means I have to stop you before you destroy yours completely. Mrs. Chen announced that both Calder and Mireya were permanently banned from all building properties. Their guest privileges were revoked, and they had 24 hours to remove any remaining belongings from my apartment. As the meeting concluded, Mireya's phone buzzed with a notification. Her face went white as she read the message. Airbnb has banned my account. They've seized all the funds pending investigation. The police officer escorted them out of the building as the other tenants watched. Nina squeezed my shoulder as we walked back to our floor. You did the right thing, Ethan. That took incredible courage. But as I sat in my apartment that evening, surrounded by the evidence of my son's betrayal, I didn't feel courageous. I felt exhausted, heartbroken, and strangely relieved. Gordon knocked on my door around sunset. How are you holding up? I keep thinking about when he was little, I admitted. He used to build these elaborate Lego cities and then knock them down just to watch them fall. I thought it was normal kid behavior, but maybe nothing, Gordon said firmly. You didn't cause this, Ethan. You gave him every opportunity to be honest, to make better choices. He chose this path. Over the following weeks, the legal process moved forward with mechanical precision. The bank recovered most of the stolen money. The building management pressed charges for the forged documents. The IRS became interested in Mireya's unreported Airbnb income. Calder called me once from jail, crying and apologizing, begging me to drop the charges. But I'd learned something important during those terrible weeks. Love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's enabling. I'll always be your father, I told him, but I won't always be your victim. 3 months later, I was sitting in my apartment, truly my apartment now, reading a letter from Calder. He was in a minimum security facility, attending counseling and working in the prison library. The letter was different from his previous communications. No manipulation, no blame, just a simple acknowledgement of what he'd done and a request for the chance to rebuild our relationship someday. Mireya had disappeared after posting bail, violating her parole conditions and triggering a federal warrant. Her social media accounts were deleted, her Airbnb profile permanently banned, and her financial accounts frozen pending investigation. I kept Gordon's hidden camera footage on a secure drive, not out of vindictiveness, but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones capable of hurting us most deeply. And a reminder that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Nina still waves to me every morning as we leave for work. The building is quiet again, the way it's supposed to be. And sometimes late at night when I'm reviewing payroll reports or balancing my checkbook, I think about that red blinking light in the smoke detector and how it took a stranger's hidden camera to show me the truth about my own life. The most important lesson I learned wasn't about fraud or legal procedures or even family dynamics. It was about the difference between being loved and being used, between being generous and being exploited, between being a father and being a victim. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are actually the ones who see you the least. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst impulses, even when that someone is your own child, especially when that someone is your own child. I never heard from Calder again after that letter. Part of me hopes he's building a better life somewhere, making different choices, treating people with the respect and honesty I tried to teach him. But I've learned that hope and expectation are different things, and I'm finally okay with hoping for the best while protecting myself from the worst. The apartment is quiet now, peaceful, and for the first time in months, when I come home from work, I know that my home is truly mine.